The sun beat down mercilessly, its rays slicing through the air and heating the dusty village roads. The smell of the earth was thick, mingling with the smell of fire and wood smoke. In the village square, a crowd of villagers had gathered, their murmurs creating a low hum that filled the otherwise silent air. There was an air of anticipation, the kind that left a thick knot in the stomach, making it impossible to breathe properly. At the center of the square, a man stood, his hands trembling at his sides, his eyes darting nervously from one elder to the next. His name was Kofi, a man who had grown up in the village, surrounded by stories of tradition, respect, and the importance of honoring the elders. He had never imagined that he would be caught in a situation like this, yet here he was, about to make a decision that could shape the rest of his life. He could feel the eyes of the entire village on him, staring, judging, waiting for him to make his move. His heart raced, each beat echoing in his chest like a drum. He swallowed hard, trying to force the lump in his throat to disappear. But no matter how many times he tried to calm himself, it remained. The elders stood before him, their expressions serious, their eyes filled with the weight of authority. The air around them was heavy with the power of tradition. They had spoken, and their words had been clear. Kofi must marry Nyoka, the heaviest woman in the village. It wasn't just a matter of love. It wasn't even about personal choice. It was a command, handed down through generations, a tradition that had been followed without question. The elders believed that Nyoka's size was more than just her appearance, it was a symbol. A symbol of the village's power, its strength, and its connection to the earth. To defy the tradition would be to invite ruin. The village would fall into chaos. Kofi knew this. He had heard the stories all his life, the stories of Nyoka's weight, the whispered fears, the rumors that surrounded her. They said she was cursed, that her size was a punishment for some unknown sin of the past. Others said she was chosen by the earth itself, a living testament to the village's power and endurance. But no one knew the truth. No one had dared to ask. And now, Kofi was standing on the precipice, about to be pulled into a world he hadn't fully understood until this very moment. Nyoka was standing off to the side, her figure almost hidden in the shadows. She was a large woman, her size not just a physical presence but an overwhelming force that seemed to fill every space around her. Her round face was expressionless, her deep brown eyes focused on Kofi with an intensity that made him shiver. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply stood there, as though waiting for something, waiting for him, perhaps. Kofi couldn't quite bring himself to look at her directly. His gaze kept shifting, unable to meet hers for too long. He was afraid of what would happen if he did. He was afraid of what the villagers might think, afraid of the future that awaited him. "Speak, Kofi," the chief elder said, his voice low and commanding. "You have heard the elder's decree. What will you do?" Kofi opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat was dry. His mind was racing. He had to say something, anything, to make this nightmare go away, to make it stop. But the words wouldn't form. He was stuck, paralyzed by fear, guilt, and uncertainty. The elders exchanged glances, their faces stern. They had been waiting for this moment for years. Kofi was the chosen one, the one who would fulfill the village's ancient promise. They had no doubt he would comply. No doubt at all. "You must marry her," the chief elder repeated, his tone soft but firm. "This is the way of our people. Do not defy the will of the ancestors." Kofi's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run, to escape from this suffocating, oppressive moment. But he couldn't. He knew better than anyone what defying the elders meant. It meant exile. It meant disgrace. It meant breaking the bond between the past and the future. And so, he spoke. The words came out in a whisper, almost inaudible in the heavy silence of the village square. "I will marry her." The crowd shifted. Some looked away, as though in shame. Others nodded in approval. The elders' faces softened, their expressions momentarily lifting as though they had just witnessed a great victory. They had won. tradition had been upheld. Kofi had done his duty. But Kofi's heart felt like it had been ripped from his chest. As he looked at Nyoka, a strange feeling crept over him. She hadn't moved. She hadn't said a word. Her eyes were still fixed on him, but there was something in them now, something unsettling. She wasn't happy. She wasn't relieved. If anything, there was a dark cloud hanging over her. Kofi felt it, the weight of her silence pressing against him. He wanted to say something to her, to apologize, to make it clear that this wasn't his choice. But the words wouldn't come. The chief elder stepped forward, signaling for the marriage ritual to begin. Kofi's gaze shifted to the ground, unable to look Nyoka in the eye. She was still staring at him. He could feel her gaze burning into him, but it was not the warmth of affection. It was the coldness of someone who had been trapped in the same cycle for far too long. The ritual was simple but ceremonial. Kofi took a step forward, reaching for Nyoka's hand. She didn't move at first, but after a long, tense moment, she slowly extended her hand toward him. Her touch was cold, her fingers large and firm. Kofi felt a shiver run through him as their hands met, but there was no turning back now. The elders began chanting, their voices rising in unison, their words ancient and powerful. Kofi stood there, still gripping Nyoka's hand. Feeling the weight of the moment, the weight of the entire village's expectations. The air was thick with anticipation. But just as Kofi was about to speak the vows, something happened. A low rumble shook the ground beneath them. At first, it was so faint that no one noticed. But then, the rumble grew stronger, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. The crowd gasped, stepping back in shock. The elders stopped chanting, their eyes wide with fear. Kofi's heart skipped a beat. Was this a sign? Was it the ancestors trying to warn them? Nyoka's grip on his hand tightened. Her expression was no longer unreadable. There was fear in her eyes now, real fear. Her face paled, and she looked around, as though expecting something, or someone, to appear. What is this? Kofi asked, his voice shaking. It's them, Nyoka whispered, her voice barely audible. It's not the earth. It's not the ancestors. They've come. Before Kofi could ask what she meant, the ground shook again, more violently this time. The earth cracked open in front of them, sending a cloud of dust into the air. The villagers screamed, running in every direction. But it wasn't the ground they feared. It was what was emerging from the cracks. Kofi's eyes widened as he saw the shadow moving beneath the earth. It was enormous, like nothing he had ever seen before. A shape darker than the night, moving swiftly and silently, emerging from the earth's depths. It seemed to be heading directly for them. Nyoka stepped back, pulling Kofi with her. We need to go, she said urgently. We need to leave now. But it was already too late. The ground trembled beneath Kofi's feet, shaking with a force that felt unnatural. It was as though the earth itself had become alive, reacting to something far deeper, something more ancient than the villagers could comprehend. People screamed in panic, running in every direction as the earth cracked further, dark fissures opening up like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. Kofi's heart raced. He felt an undeniable pull to the ground, a sinking feeling that gnawed at his insides. He tried to take a step forward but was stopped by Nyoka's firm grip. She was pulling him backward, away from the growing cracks. There's no time, she shouted, her voice urgent, tinged with an unfamiliar fear. We have to leave the village. Now. Kofi didn't know what to think. His thoughts were a tangled mess, confusion overwhelming him. Nyoka, the woman he had just agreed to marry under the threat of tradition, was now telling him to run, but from what? What was happening? And why was she the only one who seemed to know what was going on? He looked around. The villagers were in chaos, some cowering in fear, others desperately trying to escape, but the cracks in the earth were spreading faster than anyone could run. The elders, who had demanded Kofi marry Nyoka, had vanished. In their place stood only the remnants of their ancient rituals. And the terrified faces of the villagers who had followed them blindly for so long. A deep rumble echoed from the depths of the earth, louder this time, shaking the ground beneath them again. Kofi stumbled, almost losing his balance as he tried to focus on Nyoka. "What is this?" Kofi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nyoka's eyes were wide, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Her face was pale, and her usual composed demeanor was nowhere to be seen. The tough, silent woman he had seen from afar was gone, replaced by someone utterly different. Someone terrified. "It's them," she repeated, her voice trembling. "The ancestors? No, it's worse than that." "What do you mean?" Kofi's mind raced. "What's happening? What do you know that I don't?" Nyoka's grip tightened on his arm as she looked at the ground, her eyes following the deep cracks spreading out before them. The entire village was starting to sink, like the earth itself was hungry, and it wanted to pull everything into its depths. "They've come to claim what's theirs," Nyoka whispered. "And we are not ready for what that means." Kofi felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are they? What do you mean by claim?" Nyoka's expression shifted to one of desperation. She looked around, almost as if the earth itself could hear them. The once unshakable calmness in her eyes had given way to panic. She pulled him away from the main square, dragging him toward the woods that bordered the village. "We need to move," she said urgently. "Now. It's the only chance we have." Kofi wanted to resist, wanted to ask more questions, but something inside him told him that Nyoka was telling the truth. There was a danger here that he couldn't see, something far beyond the world he had known. The village, the elders, the tradition, it was all meaningless in the face of whatever was coming. He followed Nyoka, his legs heavy with confusion and fear, his mind racing with questions. What was she talking about? The ancestors? Who were they really? They ran toward the dense forest that lay beyond the village. The sounds of the earth cracking and rumbling grew fainter, but they were replaced by a different noise, one that was just as terrifying. The sky seemed to darken, and the air itself felt thick with tension, as if something was watching them from above. Kofi could hear the rustling of the trees, the whispering winds that carried a strange, almost unnatural energy. As they reached the edge of the forest, Nyoka stopped abruptly. Kofi, not expecting her to halt so suddenly, almost bumped into her. "We have to be quiet," Nyoka whispered, her voice urgent and low. "Don't make a sound." Kofi nodded, his heart hammering in his chest. He had never seen Nyoka like this before. There was no trace of the woman the elders had spoken of. This was someone entirely different. Someone who knew far more than Kofi could have imagined. They crouched down behind a large tree, its gnarled roots forming an uneven wall that provided some semblance of cover. Kofi could feel the coolness of the earth against his knees, and the silence that had settled around them was suffocating. The village, once so alive with noise and laughter, was now eerily quiet. Kofi turned to Nyoka. "What is going on? Who are they?" Nyoka took a deep breath, her face shadowed by the tree. Her expression softened, but there was still an edge of fear in her eyes. "I didn't want to tell you this. Not like this. But you need to understand." She paused, looking away as though she was struggling with what to say next. "The village's traditions are old. Older than you or me. Older than anything we know. These traditions, the ones the elders hold so dear, they're not just about respect for the ancestors. They're about appeasing a force that has been watching over us for generations. A force that no one dares to speak about." Kofi felt a cold shiver creep up his spine. "What force?" Nyoka glanced at him, her eyes filled with an almost painful intensity. "The earth itself. The spirits of the land. The ones who once ruled here, before the villagers came, before the elders made their pact. The ones who were betrayed." Kofi shook his head, unable to fully grasp what she was saying. "The earth? Spirits? What do you mean?" "The elders, they've made a deal with them, Kofi," Nyoka said in a low voice. "A long time ago, the village was founded on the belief that the earth would give us everything we needed. Prosperity, safety, strength. All we had to do in return was respect the land. And the traditions, these marriages, these rituals, they were part of that. They were designed to keep the balance between us and the earth's spirits. Kofi stared at her, dumbfounded. And what does this have to do with me? Why me? Why do I have to marry you? You're not even. He trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. Nyoka's expression darkened. You're the key, Kofi. Your bloodline, your family, it's the only one left that can fulfill the promise made by the ancestors. Promise? What promise? Nyoka took a deep breath, and for the first time, her eyes glistened with emotion. The promise to marry the Earth's chosen. The promise to marry the one who will bear the weight of the Earth's burden. She stood up slowly, her eyes searching the horizon. The Earth is angry now, Kofi. The spirits are awakening, and they are coming for what was promised to them. You have no choice anymore. We all have to pay the price. Kofi's mind was spinning. He couldn't make sense of what Nyoka was saying. None of this felt real. How could this be happening? He had always lived his life by reason and logic. There had to be another explanation. But the ground beneath them trembled again, more violently this time, and Kofi's thoughts were drowned out by the roar of something not of this world. What exactly does Nyoka mean by bearing the weight of the earth's burden? What is the price that Kofi must pay? And will the spirits really come to claim what was promised? The answers will unfold in the next part, but for now, Kofi's journey into a world of ancient secrets is just beginning. The wind howled through the trees, carrying an ominous hum that seemed to reverberate through Kofi's bones. Nyoka had pulled him deeper into the woods, her footsteps hurried and unsteady. The ground beneath their feet was soft with recent rain, but Kofi hardly noticed. His mind was still whirling, piecing together the fragments of Nyoka's cryptic words. The promise to marry the Earth's chosen. He couldn't stop repeating those words in his head. What did they mean? Why him? Why now? And what did Nyoka know that she wasn't telling him? Kofi tried to focus, tried to push the fear gnawing at his insides into the background. They had to get away from the village, that much was clear. But where would they go? And for what? Nyoka's fear was palpable, and Kofi's was growing. He couldn't ignore the increasing tremors in the ground. Each step felt heavier than the last. The trees around them bent with the force of an invisible wind, their leaves rustling in frantic whispers. The air had turned thick and stifling, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Where are we going? Kofi asked, his voice tight. We need to find the old temple, Nyoka replied, her voice shaking. It's the only place that might give us answers, and the only place where we can be safe, at least for a while. Kofi's mind raced. The old temple? He'd heard stories, of course. The elders spoke of it with reverence, but no one had seen it in generations. Some said it was lost, swallowed up by the earth itself. Others claimed it was cursed, abandoned because of the dark forces it held. Is that where they are? The ancestors? Kofi asked, his voice laced with skepticism. No, Nyoka said quickly, glancing over her shoulder to make sure they weren't being followed. Not exactly. But it's where the answers lie. If we're going to survive this, we need to understand what's happening, and how to stop it. Kofi felt his heart sink. He had no idea what Nyoka was talking about, but he could see the fear in her eyes. Whatever was going on, it was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He had always thought of his village as safe, as a place where tradition ruled, where things made sense. But now, nothing made sense anymore. The earth was shaking. The sky had darkened. And the whispers of spirits seemed to grow louder with every passing moment. They reached the edge of the forest, where the trees parted to reveal a narrow path leading up a hill. The path was barely visible, overgrown with thick vines and tangled brush. But there was something about it, something ancient and foreboding, that made Kofi's skin crawl. Are you sure this is the right way? He asked. Nyoka nodded grimly. There's no other way. The temple is on the other side of that hill. We have to hurry. They made their way up the hill, the air growing heavier with every step. The ground underfoot felt unstable, like the earth itself was shifting, trying to shake them off. Kofi could hear the faint sound of chanting, a low, guttural murmur carried on the wind. It sounded like a prayer, but there was no warmth in it, only a chilling sense of urgency. Nyoka quickened her pace, pulling Kofi along as the path narrowed. The trees grew denser, their branches stretching out like twisted fingers, blocking out the light. Kofi could barely see where they were going, but Nyoka seemed to know exactly where to step, as if she had been here before, or maybe, as if something else had guided her. "Are we close?" Kofi asked, his voice strained. His body felt heavy, like he was walking through thick mud, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Yes," Nyoka said, her eyes scanning the shadows ahead. "But we have to be careful. The temple is protected. It won't let just anyone in." Kofi raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, protected? Who's going to stop us?" Nyoka stopped suddenly, holding up a hand to silence him. Kofi froze, his heart pounding. The chanting was louder now, coming from all directions, like an echo in the night. He looked around, trying to locate the source, but there was nothing, no movement, no figures. Just the trees and the growing sense of dread in the air. "It's them," Nyoka whispered. "The spirits." Kofi's breath caught in his throat. He didn't want to believe it, but the air around him seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't explain. It felt like something was watching them, something ancient and powerful. The earth beneath his feet seemed to pulse, as if it was alive, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. "We're almost there," Nyoka said, starting to move again, more cautiously this time. Kofi followed her, trying to push the fear from his mind. He had to focus. They were close to the answers he so desperately needed. They had to be. As they crested the hill, Kofi's breath caught in his chest. Before them stood the temple, partially hidden by the thick overgrowth of vines and moss. It was an ancient structure, worn and weathered by time, but still standing strong. The stone walls were covered in faded carvings, intricate patterns that seemed to twist and shift in the dim light. "It's real," Kofi whispered, his voice barely audible. He had thought the temple was just a myth, a story to keep the children entertained. But now, standing before it, he could feel the weight of its history pressing down on him. "This is where it all began," Nyoka said quietly. "This is where the pact was made." Kofi turned to look at her. "What pact?" "The pact between the elders and the earth spirits," she said. "The pact that has kept the village safe for generations. But it's also the reason why we're in danger now." Kofi swallowed hard, trying to process what she was saying. "And what does that have to do with me?" Nyoka took a deep breath. "Your family is tied to the pact, Kofi. You're the last of the bloodline. The earth has chosen you to fulfill the promise that was made long ago. But the spirits are angry. They're coming to claim what was promised to them." Kofi's mind spun. "I don't understand. What do they want from me?" Nyoka's face darkened. "They want your life, Kofi. They want to take the life force from you, to feed on your soul. The earth's chosen was never meant to live. The pact was always a curse. You were born into it, and now it's time to pay the price." Kofi's heart stopped. His chest tightened, as if the weight of her words had physically crushed him. "No," he said, shaking his head. "There has to be another way. There must be." Nyoka's eyes softened. "I wish there was. But the spirits don't make exceptions. They'll come for you, and they won't stop until they've claimed what's theirs." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled again, more violently than before. Kofi stumbled, nearly losing his balance. The air grew colder, and the chanting grew louder, more intense, until it felt like the very earth was vibrating with the sound. "They're here," Nyoka whispered. Kofi turned toward the temple, his heart racing. He could feel the pull of something dark and ancient, drawing him closer. The temple loomed before him, its stone walls cold and unyielding. There was no turning back now. As Kofi and Nyoka approach the temple, the air grows thicker with the presence of the spirits. The earth trembles beneath their feet, and Kofi is faced with a terrifying realization: there is no escaping the curse that binds him. Will he be able to survive the wrath of the spirits? And what will the temple reveal about his fate? Kofi's heart raced as the earth beneath his feet continued to tremble. The cold air felt like it was choking him, each breath shallow and strained. The chant that echoed around them was no longer distant, it was all-encompassing, filling his ears and his mind. Every step toward the temple felt like he was walking into a trap. Nyoka's grip on his arm tightened, her face pale with fear. She didn't speak, but her wide eyes spoke volumes. The temple loomed ahead of them, ancient and ominous, its stone walls covered in ivy and moss, as if time itself had decided to claim it. But there was something else in the air, something darker than the simple weight of age. It was as though the very place exuded an evil energy, a presence that demanded respect, or fear. Kofi didn't know what to expect when they reached the temple, but he hadn't anticipated the sheer force of the oppressive power that now seemed to press in on them. Every muscle in his body screamed to turn back, to flee, but there was no running from this. He couldn't escape what had been set into motion so long ago. "We're almost there," Nyoka whispered, her voice trembling. "We just need to enter." The path up to the temple's entrance was winding and narrow, flanked by enormous stone pillars that had long since crumbled. Some of the carvings on the pillars were still faintly visible, depicting ancient rituals and symbols Kofi didn't recognize. The air felt thick with history, but also with something else, a malevolent presence that made Kofi's skin crawl. As they reached the top of the path, the ground beneath them cracked with a loud snap. Kofi froze, his heart skipping a beat. He turned, expecting to see the earth itself splitting open, but instead, the tremors seemed to come from within the temple itself. "It's starting," Nyoka said, her voice barely audible. "The spirits are waking up." Kofi felt a cold shiver run through him. He glanced at the temple's entrance, now only a few feet away. The large stone door was slightly ajar, and a faint light flickered from inside. But the light was wrong. It wasn't warm or inviting, it was cold, flickering like the last dying embers of a fire. Nyoka stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached for the door. "Come on," she urged. "We don't have much time." Kofi hesitated. His instinct screamed at him to turn back, to run from the temple, from the curse, from everything. But he couldn't. The weight of the earth's curse was already upon him. There was no escaping it now. He nodded grimly and followed Nyoka into the temple. The air inside was thick with dust, the remnants of ages long past. The walls were covered in faded murals, depicting ancient rituals that made Kofi's stomach turn. Some of the images were too dark to even comprehend, twisted scenes of people kneeling before monstrous, otherworldly figures. His eyes lingered on one image, a massive serpent-like creature coiled around a human figure, its jaws wide open in a grotesque mockery of life. What is all this?" Kofi whispered, his voice shaking as he took in the strange and terrifying artwork. Nyoka didn't answer immediately. She walked deeper into the temple, past the murals, her movements swift and practiced. Kofi followed, his senses heightened, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up as he felt something else shift in the air. "The spirits," Nyoka said softly. "They watch us, Kofi. They're angry." Kofi didn't know if she meant the spirits of the ancestors or something far darker. But the more he walked through the temple, the more the air seemed to close in on him, until it felt like he was suffocating. Every step felt like he was descending further into the belly of the beast. They passed a series of altars, each one covered in old offerings, broken pottery, dried flowers, and bones. The floor beneath their feet was uneven, like the temple was slowly collapsing, inch by inch, under the weight of centuries. Nyoka stopped at a large stone archway, a circular opening in the wall. Above the arch, strange symbols were etched into the stone, symbols that Kofi could not decipher, but that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. "This is it," Nyoka said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to Kofi. The heart of the temple. The place where it all began. Kofi felt a surge of fear. What is this place? Nyoka took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the archway. The portal. Kofi's stomach twisted. Portal? Portal to what? To the spirit world, Nyoka replied, her voice barely audible. The place where the Earth's chosen are bound. Kofi shook his head. I don't understand. Nyoka turned to face him, her eyes filled with a deep sorrow. The curse, Kofi. It's not just about the spirits. It's about the Earth itself. The spirits are bound to the Earth, and the Earth is bound to the chosen. The pact that was made centuries ago wasn't just to keep the village safe. It was a bargain. A bargain to keep the Earth alive. And you, Kofi, you are the price. The words hit Kofi like a punch to the gut. His breath caught in his throat. What do you mean? The Earth, Nyoka said, her voice low and shaky. It's dying, Kofi. The balance has been disturbed. The pact is breaking. And the spirits, they want you, they want your life force, to restore the Earth and renew the pact. Kofi felt his knees grow weak. So, the Earth is dying? Nyoka nodded. Yes. And you are the only one who can save it. But to do that, you must fulfill the pact. The weight of her words settled heavily on his chest. The Earth was dying. He was the key to its survival. But there was a catch, a terrible, inescapable price. He looked at the portal again, a swirling vortex of darkness. Something about it called to him, pulling at him with an undeniable force. His heart raced, and he felt a strange compulsion to step forward, but his mind screamed at him to resist. I can't, Kofi whispered. I can't do this. Nyoka's eyes softened. You don't have a choice. She stepped toward the portal, her hand reaching out toward it. The ritual must be completed. The Earth has chosen you, Kofi. You are the last of the bloodline. You are the only one who can fulfill the pact. Kofi's heart pounded in his chest. He was trapped, caught in a web of fate that he couldn't escape. He thought he had come here seeking answers, but now, the answers were more horrifying than he could have ever imagined. The air around him grew thick with tension. The chanting outside had grown louder, more insistent, like the spirits were closing in. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook with such force that Kofi stumbled. The walls of the temple cracked, sending dust and debris cascading from the ceiling. The darkness inside the portal swirled violently, pulling at everything around it, as if it was alive. Nyoka reached out to Kofi, her hand trembling. We don't have much time. You have to make a choice. Kofi's mind spun. He was out of time. His whole life had led him here, and now, the truth was clear. The curse of the Earth had chosen him, and there was no running from it. With trembling hands, he stepped toward the portal. As Kofi steps closer to the portal, the Earth trembles with a violent force. The spirits' voices grow louder, and the temple begins to collapse around him. Is he ready to face the price of the Earth's survival, or is he walking into his doom? Will he fulfill the pact, or will the spirits claim his life? The air in the temple had become thick, heavy with the sense that something was about to give way, something beyond Kofi's comprehension. The ground beneath his feet trembled, the walls cracked, and the light from the portal seemed to swallow everything in its path. Each breath Kofi took was shallow, as though even the air around him had grown thick with something ancient and malevolent. He could hear the distant chants growing louder, more insistent, as if the spirits were calling to him. It was the moment of truth. He had stepped into the heart of the Earth's curse, and now, there was no turning back. Nyoka stood beside him, her face ashen, her eyes filled with both fear and something else, perhaps resignation. She seemed to understand, in some deeply ingrained way, what was happening. It was as though the weight of her own fate was intertwined with his. Are you ready, Kofi? She whispered, her voice trembling. You can still back out, but it won't change anything. Kofi looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. Back out? He echoed, his voice barely a whisper. How could I possibly back out of something like this? Naoka nodded solemnly. You can run, but you can't escape the price. The spirits won't let you. The earth won't let you. The words hit Kofi like a blow to the chest. The truth was too much to bear. The earth was dying, and he was the key to its survival. He had been chosen, not by fate, but by something far older, something he couldn't even begin to understand. The earth, the spirits, the curse, it was all tied to him, and to break free of it would mean condemning not just himself, but the village, the land, and everyone he cared about. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to shut out the overwhelming weight of the decision. It felt like the world was closing in on him, the walls of the temple pressing in from all sides. His breath quickened, and his pulse raced. I don't know if I can do this, he muttered, his voice filled with doubt. I don't want to die for this. I don't want to. You won't die, Naoka interrupted softly. Not if you do it right. The pact, it requires a sacrifice, yes. But it doesn't have to be your life. The spirits, they want something else. Kofi's head snapped up. What do you mean? What do they want? Naoka hesitated for a long moment before answering. She looked deep into his eyes, as though trying to measure the depths of his soul. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They want your soul, Kofi. Not your life, but your spirit. They want you to become one with the earth, to be bound to it, to be the vessel through which the earth's curse is lifted. Your body will remain here, but your spirit will be theirs. Kofi's heart skipped a beat. My soul? Yes, Naoka nodded. The earth's power comes from the balance between the spirit world and the physical world. The pact was never about just protecting the village, it was about maintaining that balance. The spirits need a human soul to remain tethered to the physical world so they can restore the earth. They want your soul to feed the land's vitality. Kofi stumbled backward, his legs nearly giving way beneath him. That's insane. You mean, I'll be nothing more than a vessel? My soul, my spirit, gone forever? Naoka lowered her gaze. Yes. But you will live on in the earth, in the land. Your sacrifice will give the village and the land another chance. You'll become part of the earth's very heartbeat, its pulse. And the curse will be lifted. Kofi stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind howling in his ears as he stared out at the vast expanse of the land below. His body was still, but his mind raced, trying to process the enormity of the decision that loomed over him. He had spent days, weeks even, wrestling with the consequences of his choice. But now, standing here, on the precipice of his fate, everything seemed clearer than ever. The village was at peace, yet not. The curse had been lifted, the land seemed to breathe again, and the people no longer lived in constant fear. But Kofi knew that this peace was temporary, that it came at a price. A price he had already paid. The past few days had felt like a blur. After the ceremony, after the spirits had accepted him as their vessel, everything had shifted. Kofi had been bound to the earth in ways he couldn't fully understand. His body was still here, but his soul was tethered to the land, an endless cycle of life and death intertwined. He had become both part of the earth and apart from it. His emotions, however, were far from settled. Was this what he truly wanted? Was it worth it? He turned away from the edge and looked back toward the village, the familiar sights of home filling him with a strange mix of nostalgia and sorrow. The people he loved, the ones who had once relied on him, they no longer needed him in the same way. They had their freedom, their peace. But at what cost? Kofi's thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind him. You've made your choice, Kofi, Naoka said, stepping forward. Her presence was comforting, yet distant, as though she, too, had become something more than human in the days since the ceremony. I didn't want to, Kofi replied, his voice heavy with regret. I didn't want to be the one to make this choice. But now, I feel like a stranger in my own skin. Naoka nodded, her expression soft yet knowing. You are no longer the person you once were. But that doesn't mean you've lost yourself. You are the land now, Kofi. You are a part of the earth's heart, and that heart beats within you. But the world is still here, still waiting for you to embrace it. Kofi shook his head, unable to grasp her words. How can I embrace something I've already given up? How can I live in a world where I don't belong? You still belong here, Nyoka said. Your soul may have been claimed by the earth, but you are not without purpose. The spirits didn't take everything from you, Kofi. They gave you something, too. What did they give me? Kofi asked, the bitterness creeping into his voice. A life of endless servitude? A soul bound to a dying land? They gave you the chance to protect it, Nyoka replied softly. They gave you the chance to be the bridge between this world and the next. You are both the past and the future, Kofi. You are the protector of this land, the guardian of its memory. Kofi took a deep breath and turned back toward the edge of the cliff. Below him, the village lay peaceful, unaware of the sacrifice he had made, unaware of the price he had paid. His heart ached for them, for the life he had once known. But as much as he longed for the past, he knew he couldn't return to it. He had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. I don't know if I can keep living like this, Kofi whispered, almost to himself. Nyoka placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm despite the chill of the wind. You don't have to do it alone. You have the land, the spirits, and you have me. We are in this together, Kofi. And as long as you're here, the earth will never forget you. Kofi's eyes closed, and for a moment, he allowed himself to feel the land beneath his feet. The vibrations, subtle yet constant, were like the beating of a heart. His heart. The earth's heart. They were one and the same now. What happens next? Kofi asked, his voice barely audible. Next? Nyoka repeated, her lips curving into a slight smile. Next, you live. You live as the land lives. You protect it, you nurture it. And you never forget that you are its guardian. Your life will no longer be ordinary, Kofi. But you'll never be alone. Kofi nodded, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt a sense of peace. The land was at rest, the spirits were satisfied, and the curse had been lifted. But it wasn't just the land that had been saved. He had been saved too. Even if his soul was no longer fully his own, it was still part of something greater. Something eternal. And in that moment, Kofi understood. The price he had paid was great, but it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. As Kofi turned away from the cliff, the distant hum of the earth seemed to resonate in his chest, filling him with a sense of purpose that had once seemed beyond his reach. His journey was not over. It had only just begun. The village, the spirits, and the earth were all now connected through him. He was no longer just a man. He was a protector, a guardian, and a part of something far larger than himself. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in his life, he felt ready to face it. With Nyoka by his side, with the earth beneath his feet, and with the spirits watching over him, Kofi was ready for whatever came next. The curse had been lifted, but the story was far from over.